Hey, everybody. Welcome to our operator workshop for this month. We'll let people trickle in here and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. If you didn't know, this workshop that we're doing each month for operator specific type topics, we do, monthly. So join us. We try to time it for end of month and we try to look at different operating topics that people would care about in regards to, managing Redis. Today, we're going to be looking at Redis as a vector database, as that has been highly requested from people joining our monthly series. It's been in a lot of different talk lately, especially around AWS, as we've just become not just, but it was a couple months ago, a vector database for AWS Bedrock. So, and there's only a couple options there, and we're one of them, which is great. Um, why don't let us know where you're from and part of the world. I know that we have regular viewers from all across the world. Appreciate you being here. We'll go ahead and get started in just like 30 seconds or so. So let us know where you're from. I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm really close to the mountains. I love skiing. It's a great time of year for people like me who love to go skiing. We'll go in a little bit more of my background here in just a moment. Yeah, great to have you all here. I'm looking up here in the top right. I'm looking at the chat. Bangladesh, hey, welcome, Tamoy. Thank you for being here. Yeah, if I'm looking up here, I'm looking at the chat. If I'm looking here, I'm looking at the slides. So, anyways, let's go and get started. Today is going to be really exciting. We're going to go over exploring Redis as a vector database. Actually, we'll go into the agenda in just a moment. But let's start off with an intro of me. This is obviously an AI generated image. I thought it was quite interesting. It gave me earrings. It gave me it looks like maybe lipstick, and I'm like, okay, well, I didn't give it any data points to do that, which we'll actually go into later on why AI and generative apps can give us some different outputs than what we're expecting. But so I'm a senior technical PMM at Redis. I've been at Redis for almost 3 years now. Well, 2.5 ish plus. And before Redis, I'm not I'm not a typical marketer. I have a technical background. I've been at Oracle doing system design and analyst. And I was also at Domo, which is a Utah-based business intelligence company. I did implementation there. And then, yeah, Redis called me and said, hey, come on over and do some technical marketing. I had no idea what that was. But now that I'm here, it's been amazing. I love it. Being able to kind of close the gap between, technical aspects, but also storytelling, which is great. Let's jump into the agenda for today. We're going to be going, deep into LLMs, what they are. We're going to talk about the challenges in production that we're noticing with LLMs. And then we're going to discuss a data strategy evolution that will be required to use LLMs. And finally, of course, talk about how Redis Enterprise plays in that space. So let me know in the chat, if you're familiar with LLMs. I'd be surprised if you're not, which is okay. But I feel like LLMs and AI has been, on LinkedIn and in content ad nauseum as of late. But yeah, let me know. And also let me know if there are any of you trying to use LLMs in your current or upcoming projects. I know that, I like to hear some fascinating stuff going on your side of things, especially with Redis. Let us know. All right. So I think an interesting graph that we have here for Taylor Swift and ChatGPT. They're keeping up with interest over a pretty long time period. I'd love to add Travis Kelce to this chart as well and see if he's right in line with the others. I'm sure it's probably close. Some either like or don't like. The point is that ChatGPT and LLMs in general are, I think past the point of hype and now are going to be part of our day-to-day going forward. In fact, I just saw a survey yesterday from Pluralsight, is a local Utah technical enablement type company, education. The survey said, do you think AI will become a basic, expectation of knowledge like it was back in the day to know spreadsheets and to know how to use a desktop. And most people said yes, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I'm not sure about it quite yet. Let's talk about, at a high level, two different types of models. First, foundational models is our traditional data science models where we are using text, images, and audio to predict something, an output of a specific result. And then we have large language models. For example, GPT, Llama, Falcon, and a bunch of other LLM models are coming out with seems like a daily basis. From my personal experience, what I find interesting is the input of data between these two different types of models. As you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, LLMs are using or are trained on massive text sources from all across the web, usually unstructured, which is pretty interesting. 5 to 10 years ago, I used to be in data science. When I was at Domo, that business intelligence company, I worked on a data science team. And 5 to 10 years ago, when we were using primarily foundational models, this would have been a crazy concept. And there used to be this saying, or I'm sure it's still a saying, which is, bad data in, bad data out. And there still is some cleaning and so forth that I know that people are doing with LLMs, but it was far more important to have a clean data set with foundational models. The LLMs, they do a great job with unstructured data and using the most relevant and accurate data, but it isn't always perfect. And just like my AI, image, and I'm sure you've had your own personal experiences using ChatGPT or other LLMs where you're like, well, that's not correct. I know I had one yesterday when I was asking something about Lord of the Rings. I knew this quote that happened on the first movie, and I was like, wait, what was it exactly? And it told me it was on the second movie. I was like, no, it definitely wasn't. And I had to look it up on like IMDb, and I was like, sure enough, it was on the first movie. But let me know in the chat if you've had any interesting inaccurate results for LLMs. We'll talk about those later. They're called hallucinations. But finally, just to kind of put this slide to rest is, as I describe on the bottom here, it's better for more advanced use cases that a lot of generative AI apps are targeting today. And we'll go into those. So an interesting survey here from Battery Ventures where they are seeing less companies stay on the sidelines. And look, I'll be honest, I personally was a skeptic when all the hype started. I thought, there's no way every large enterprise company out there will jump into the AI space, especially not your small to medium sized companies, because the previous requirement of needing in-house expertise to handle AI, ML, and data science. But it looks like I was wrong. People are jumping into the hype and trying to take advantage of this wave of AI. So I think it's here to stay around. What's interesting is that this massive ramp up from nearly 80% from 32% is higher adoption rate than the movement to the cloud, which was leaving businesses sitting on the sidelines feeling a bit of FOMO. So that's kind of crazy to think that this AI wave is generating bigger ramp up than the cloud. Really, really crazy. It kind of puts it in perspective. So here is a good diagram, I think, to get us, into start going into technicalities of why a lot of companies are interested in LLMs. Companies are wanting to take advantage of their already existing data, combine it with the power of AI, and then get the value out on the other side with some of these example use cases, like our obvious Chat GPT example of questions and answering, search, content generation, and a lot of automation. I'm sure a lot of you have recently seen OpenAI's announcement of text to video, which is pretty awesome. I can't wait to hopefully try that out one day. So let's jump into the challenges. These are the same challenges that prevent projects from reaching production or producing value that we've seen over the last 20 years with previous foundational models. So some of it's definitely unique, but some of it is familiar for those who are trying to get this new technology into production. And these they're legitimate problems, whether you're self-hosting or fine-tuning a model on top of an existing model. You know, it can cost a lot because of the immense amount of compute. And then there are quality issues that are talked about generally out there in the industry, as I've kind of started to point out. LLMs can be known to be too broad because most people start off using non-domain specific data. But what if the LLM is producing results that are, specific to your hospital or your supply chain, right? If it's not specific enough to you and your business, it's really useless. And we call these types of outputs hallucinations. Performance-wise, LLMs are known to be slow, and we all know that that just isn't acceptable nowadays, where latency is the new, downtime, essentially. If there's any sort of delay, I think nowadays we've been trained just to get anxious and move on to the next thing, which is kind of crazy. In regard to security, there's a real concern with potential leaks of sensitive data, and there's a lot of talk on setting up strict governance. But if anybody here has been in governance, they know, and we know, that it takes a lot of time and effort to set up. And then there's a challenge that a lot of companies are talking about that keep them on the sidelines, which I call the shiny object syndrome. There's just a ton of noise right now, incredible innovation, but so much so that it's hard to tell what's what, who you can trust, and who you can rely on to solve your challenges and ultimately elevate your business. So you're probably picking up on what's where this is going. Redis obviously is a trusted brand, a database here to stay, and is relied on for enterprise production workflows across every industry. So why vector databases and LLMs? Well, I wish we were in a room right now. I could do like a raise of hands question, but I'll ask it, I guess, rhetorically for those in the chat today, which is, who would let ChatGPT blindly make stock trades for you or make personal finance decisions for you without any input? So just blindly. And I think right now, as of today, in February 2024, the answer is no. I don't think anybody would. The kind of scary thing to me about that, I think what's really missing for me personally is how confidently an LLM can answer a question when it's wrong. I think that it would make leaps and bounds and improvement if the LLM was able to recognize that, that maybe this isn't the correct answer, but this is the information that I have, right? I think that personally would make a big difference for me. So yes, LLMs on their own, they can understand the basics of, going back to my making stock trades for you. They can know the basics of personal finance, economics, but it doesn't know your risk tolerance personally. It doesn't know where you're at in your financial journey, your goals, etc. And the scariest thing is that it doesn't even know the very latest market activity, right? I'm sure you've noticed this if you've asked certain questions. I know that I've noticed this just recently. It relies on, the LLMs are typically, they rely on or is trained on data up to a certain cutoff date. I noticed this recently as I've been asking it some tax questions. And it's been really good. It's giving me some really good tax answers. But the problem is, I'm glad it's telling me this, but the LLM is like, hey, by the way, this tax information that I'm providing you is based off of 2022. And if there's any of those in the United States, it might be the same, outside. Maybe in India, you have to let me know. But man, tax data from 2022 is out of date, right? Every year the rules change, everything changes, right? So just another example where, we need more specific data or domain specific data. So we may need to rethink our data strategy if we're going to use LLMs. If the goal is to, as an organization, take advantage of LLMs with your private domain specific data, then we'll need to rethink, our strategy. There are two strategies for, trying to improve LLM response quality and reduce overall costs, but they don't go far in solving this problem. And let me tell you why. First, there's fine tuning. It's not a vector database. It's not, training a model from scratch, but there are some trade-offs like the expense of further training them, hosting these models, and they could potentially expose sensitive data. And I've just recently built like an app for fraud detection using AWS SageMaker, using Redis Cloud as the vector database, and even just keeping those models on in SageMaker. Man, yeah, it's recurring a cost. So I know that just on my simple example, I know that my data set was really small and my models were relatively complex, and there were just two models. But over time, you think about these enterprises that need dozens of models, it can be really expensive to have to fine tune or retrain as well. And what about this brute force approach where we're kind of feeding everything to the prompt? We're going to take all of your data, all of the docs, and copy and paste into a prompt. Even if your data was small enough for this, this is super expensive because of API costs, because of the charge per token and other limitations depending on the LLM you're using. So because those strategies, on the previous, slide aren't super effective or useful, vector databases have emerged. That's kind of like the history of why a vector database has become a thing. It's about taking your data sources, putting them into, format machines can understand, work with, and search across so applications can interface with it. It's a pretty simple diagram on the screen, hopefully. Had enough time to look at it. We're going to move on. So let's look at an example here. Our three simple sentences, let's say, that are parts, or a part of one PDF file, right? And we're trying to get the sentiment analysis of like, what is this PDF telling me? What is it about, right? And if you're a math person, you're going to recognize the graph on the right, cosine, right? We can see what's most similarly or most similar semantically. A vector database or vector similarity search can make those inferences for us. Vector similarity search does that. So, for those who aren't math majors or can't remember, high school math or college math, we're essentially taking, if you look at the two red arrows on the top and the green arrow in the middle, we're taking the most relative point on essentially the data. So, we're basically taking away that this is a happy person, essentially, is what the sentiment analysis is telling us. But that's just one example, and that's just one computation that you can do with vector databases with Redis. We'll kind of go into some of the others as well. So cosine's not the only one. So let's talk about injecting your data at runtime with RAG. RAG being retrieval augmented generation, which is a term I do not like. It's awful. Let's demystify it, shall we? It's actually very simple. It's querying a knowledge base to fetch helpful and contextual information. That's it. Not sure why we need, I get it. We need terms, but it really isn't as complex as the name suggests. A lot of people think that injecting a prompt with this vector database fetch is training or fine-tuning a model, but it's not. It's a different approach. We're just using the model as is. So we're not changing the model, and we're combining it with your data. I'll show you what I mean with the next slide. So this is a busy slide. So start with me on the top left with the question. The question goes through, an embedding model into a vector search, which retrieves the relevant results. It then starts to build the system prompt, which includes the original question and the context and the result. We pass that system prompt to an LLM that generates the answer with all of the information. There's a great open source example called Archive Chat Guru that you can go and check out if you want to dive deeper technically there on the bottom. I'll leave this up just for a couple seconds longer in case anyone is typing in this this URL manually. I should have probably copied and pasted it in the chat before we started here. But so yeah, this is a quick technical diagram of what a RAG looks like, at least from step one to the end of the steps. There can be many depending on your architecture, but here you go. But what if we already know the answer, right? What if we have a technician in the field who is trying to fix a refrigerator with a certain error code? If users are asking the same question but worded a little differently, then we're probably already thinking about caching, right? But it's not just, you know, predefined answers like, a system code or like facts about Earth, right? Like what's the deepest lake on Earth? Predefined questions and answers, but also scenarios can be very, very easily cached and returned quickly. And I'll show you what I mean. Semantic caching for LLMs, it's very, for very similar questions should yield the same results, right? You can basically short circuit the entire process by using Redis as a semantic caching layer for your LLM application, which obviously is going to return responses much quicker, which improves user experience, but also, of course, lowers the cost because there's no additional API call to the LLM. So yeah, this is a quick and easy example of that. And Redis is already deeply integrated with observability, provisioning, and security technologies, and the existing ecosystem for AI like LangChain, Relevance AI, NVIDIA, and Llama Index. I know that there's a ton of AI startups, and building a ecosystem around technology is really a hard part for some of these startups. It takes time. I know that because Redis, we've been around for so long. I think we've been doing production workloads with enterprise companies longer than Pinecone's been a business, right? Um, but on top of that, Redis already has a robust client library. Many of the newer vector database offerings out there are just based on Python, right? And we know that developers come with all shapes and sizes and prefer their own language, right? And again, with Redis, you have many different search techniques, distance metrics, or even combining data types for hybrid queries and advanced indexing, like cosine. There is a distance metric that I mentioned before. What's interesting, I think, at least the biggest case, and obviously I'm biased because I'm with Redis, but if I was outside of Redis, I think the biggest case for Redis as a vector database is this, which is, if you own a credit card, you're most likely an end user of Redis. Or if you're using, e-commerce website and they're holding on to your shopping cart for longer than a day, you're most likely using Redis. Redis is everywhere. Everybody knows Redis. Redis is in every computer science classroom, right? Which makes me think, the scale of use cases Redis Enterprise is working with today is far greater than these new vector solutions. And many companies are already using Redis in some sort of fashion. So it's much easier for companies to just extend Redis to another use case like vector instead of acquiring another solution in a tech stack and go through the whole POC process. You know what I mean? Also, Redis is more than just a vector database. So it can fulfill other requirements as well outside of LLMs or AI, like session management, like I mentioned before with shopping carts, caching, of course, search and retrieval, job queuing, pub sub, leaderboard, streaming, etc. There's so many use cases that Redis Enterprise is used for across the board in enterprises that already have it in their stack, which I think is a big reason to use Redis. And in fact, I have an interesting story. This happened just last week. I was on a call with someone from AWS, and one of the, they're more technical. It wasn't like some strategic or manager of some sort. It was a technical, role at AWS. And they were telling me that they were trying to set up their first AI Gen app using SageMaker and Bedrock. And they were trying to use Pinecone, and it was just difficult. And trying to figure it out. And while they were trying to figure out their issues with Pinecone, they found out that Redis stores vectors. And all of a sudden, I'm sure all developers can relate to this. It's like, oh, I know Redis. Redis is easy to use. And he got really excited and started to use that in his solution. And it really puts the point home for me, at least, hearing these stories, talking to people like at AWS and other companies, that developers are familiar with it. They use it, and it also makes sense for enterprise companies for the things that I mentioned here on the slide. But I think I'll end here with a quote from one of our customers using Vector. Does anybody know? Let's kind of focus down on the before we read this. Is the author of this quote, Gene Paoli. So Gene Paoli is the creator of the XML standard, which is crazy. If you, he's been in the industry, or at least in the computer infrastructure industry for a very long time. And he started Dokugami a couple of years ago. And they've adopted Redis Enterprise not only for their vector database, but also for their backing store for Apache Spark. And just wanted to highlight, Redis Enterprise's ability to handle multiple use cases here. Great. Well, that is it for my session. I think talking about vector and AI is really fun. That's the cool thing about it, is even though we're seeing and hearing about AI ad nauseum, just nonstop, it's still fun to explore and talk about. And we are generating, and we already have built a lot of assets for Redis as a vector database on our website. Go check it out. And we also have a ton of series of webinars coming out in March up until late spring. So yeah, keep an eye out for those. But for now, if you have any questions, let me know. I'd be happy to answer them. And like I said, this operator workshop is a monthly series. I actually haven't decided next month's topic yet, but I think we'll return to probably either something on Redis Cloud, or something operator specific, to just the whole build versus buy approach, right? Where would you rather build it in open source, or kind of buy it and have the operational simplicity in an enterprise product? We'll probably return to a topic similar to that mindset, but to be determined. Keep your notifications on, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. With that, thanks for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you.